drama was taking place over the weekend in East Arnhem Land in Perth. It was revealed the Western Australian government would scrap its controversial new cultural heritage laws. The new laws, developed under Mark McGowan but left for the new Premier Roger Cook to roll out, restrict the ability for landowners to develop on sites that have distinct Aboriginal cultural heritage. In some cases, it would have required landowners to seek special permits or prepare management plans, depending on the impact on surrounding land. The laws had sparked outrage from farmers and the state opposition, whose leader, Shane Love, joined me a short time ago. Shane Love, thanks for your time. Do you feel a victory today over the Cook government with being apparent they're dumping their plans for this Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act?
Well, we're yet to hear exactly what is the case. There's been reports in the press. Understand that there have been stakeholder meetings this morning between the Premier and organisations such as farmers and miners, but we're yet to get any clarity in Western Australia about exactly what is the situation here, but expecting to hear in the next day or so that there will be a repeal of the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act.
And what was in the new Act? What were the impositions that were threatened to be put on farmers and the like? Well, what the new Act had within it was a system where there was a confusion, I think, between the holders of Aboriginal cultural knowledge, the Aboriginal people, and the system of administering the safeguarding and the requirements for development approvals, etc., and management plans under that legislation. So there was no separation really between those who were making the decisions and those who were charging the fees, and that's always a bad thing. Well, give us an example about how it was to work that's been the subject of controversy.
Well, what it meant was that anybody who was on a property of more than 1,100 square metres that wanted to undertake any of the activities that you would normally think were normal on those things, like digging holes or driving, putting in driveways, etc. All of those activities were subject to the Act, and people could actually find themselves subject to fines if they didn't go through a process which would involve them undertaking due diligence, which could involve and probably would involve for many activities having to pay for people to come and look at the property and survey the property for cultural heritage, etc. All of that costing a lot of money, but also a lot of time. And we also had a situation in the state where there wasn't the processes put in place where people could get approval. So I'm aware of situations where miners, for instance, who had contracted drillers to come in and work at the site, had actually had to lay the drillers off and put off the programs because they actually didn't know how they could put in place the necessary approvals so as to not potentially run foul of this legislation. So in effect, what we were seeing was business grinding to a halt across the state.
How did it compare to the requirements under the original Act?
Well, the difference under the original Act was that a site was registered after the Aboriginal Cultural Materials Committee had examined the evidence, and then it was put on the register. And then there was processes where people, if there were instances of Aboriginal cultural heritage on their properties, there was quite clearly laid out in the register, and there were processes where they could go to that committee and work through to get understanding as to how they could undertake their development in a way that was in accordance with the legislation. All of that's much more confused under the new Act, and there's far less rigour in determining whether or not there is any significance to a site. It just really needs to be reported by someone, and it goes up on the website. So consequently, you're seeing a plethora of sites being registered since this legislation came in.
How much has this legislation hurt the Voice campaign in WA in your view?
Look, I think there's certainly there are different arguments and different discussions, but there's no doubt that it's fed into the discussion around the Voice and people's thinking about that in general. So I would say that it's probably likely that the Prime Minister has had some words with the Premier of the state, and not only for the Voice but also for the popularity of the Labor federal government in Western Australia. I'm sure he's been expressing some concerns.
Well, you're Nationals leader and therefore opposition leader after the decimation of the Liberal Party at the last state election. With Mark McGowan gone, what are the coalition's prospects there now? Well, we're not using the coalition term at this stage. We're in alliance with yes, I understand.
Party,
sorry.
There's
yes.
no doubt. But there's no doubt that the situation has changed dramatically, and we know that we have now got a Premier who doesn't have that enormous brand recognition and that popularity that McGowan had built up over the years, with many of the older people now turning away from Labor. They felt indebted after COVID to Mr McGowan. They don't feel that same level of gratitude towards the current government. We've got a Premier who came to office not on the back of popular vote, but on the back of the backing of a few unions and the splintering of his own union because they backed somebody else. So that's a very weak situation for the Premier, and we're keen to get to work over the next 18 months or so, so that in 2025 we can have a change of government here in Western Australia. I believe that's actually absolutely attainable in 2025. So we'll be working really hard to get to that point.
All right, just finally, what's your reaction to the ABC's conduct at the home of Woodside Chief Meg O'Neill last week?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting, and it reminds me of some of the other carry-on we've seen with implanting film crews on livestock ships, etc. This is the type of behaviour that activists rely on, that exposure through the media, and for Four Corners to have engaged in that sort of behaviour, knowing they were going to a private house. What on earth did they think they were doing? It's disgusting.
Opposition Leader in WA, Shane Love, thanks so much for your time.